Welcome to Power of the Tribe podcast. I'm your host, John Connors. I'm also the founder and head instructor of Connors Martial Arts here in Norwood, Mass. We teach Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, Muay Thai, kickboxing, and mixed martial arts. Send us a message, give us a call, come in and see us, and we will help you find your inner badass and make it your outer badass, Dan. And I'm here with Dan Robin, my co-host. How you doing?
I'm doing fair.
Fair. Okay, we're not
good.
even going to get into that. We're going to talk about fighting.
No, that's why I'm doing good, in fact, because this is our very special,
right?
A very special episode.
Yes, we're going to talk about jiu-jitsu, fighting, mixed martial arts, mugging, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Self-defense.
So everyone from martial arts to practical use to using it in the gym, using it on the street.
But before we do that, how are you on a scale of 1 to 10?
Pretty good. I'd say solid 7. 7 out of 10.
One of these days you're going to throw me a curveball, but 7?
Yeah, I'm pretty good.
Yeah, you seem pretty solid.
So I don't want to go into it because we got to get into our thing, but a real quick.
Yeah.
You already know this, but for the first time in about 2 years, I'm convinced that I'm going to live.
Oh my gosh!
Remember?
I didn't know it was 2 years.
It's been roughly that.
That's far too long.
Yeah, the 20-second version is looking at like something unrelated, like a rib injury. Someone told me, and I'm sure people out there have similar kind of thing. People don't really talk about medical scares, but they were like, "We see something funny on your liver," and I was like, "That's like a fatal place to have something funny."
You kind of need your liver.
Yeah, and they were even told me, they were like, "It's probably nothing." So, and I was still really nervous, and I was like, I can't imagine the people that are not told it's probably nothing. But in the last week, I got, a follow-up test, and they were like, yeah, it's nothing.
It's nothing.
So for like 2 years, I was pretty, I was like, I may live, may not live. And now it's
You've been
looking
treating
like I'm
your
live.
liver like a speed bag for the last 30 years.
It seems to be all scarred, and they're like, we see all kinds of scarring. Like it's had a hard life, but apparently none of it is fatal.
It's a lot of scarring, and I think I can actually read the words Tito's vodka on
I
here.
think they actually looked at the MRI image and then just kind of looked at me and shook their heads like disapprovingly. They were like, "Oh boy," they looked over at me, glared at me. I was like, "Oh, well, sorry, I know, sorry, I apologize."
But you're healthy.
Yes, that's like the look I got. Did I tell you in college when I broke the bones in my hand?
No,
I broke these 3 bones in my hand, and
you're kind of phalanges,
metacarpals, aren't they?
Metacarpals. Yeah.
So 3 of them broke, and
How'd you do that?
I was basically joking around with a friend.
Okay.
But it was a punch.
You punched your friend?
Yes, but it was not as bad as it sounds.
Where did you punch him? Where did the punch land?
His hip.
His hip.
And he was flying through the air. He was
punched
airborne.
him in the hip.
And he was airborne.
That's usually not a target area.
Well, he had jumped off the back of a couch.
Oh, this all makes
toward
sense
me,
now. Yeah.
And I threw an uppercut as he was flying through the air, and it hit his hip. So,
Were you aiming for his groin or more?
Stomach.
Okay. Yeah.
So he claims to this day that I broke my hand on his stomach.
He's
all
like
these
Harry
years
Houdini.
later.
Yeah.
25 years later, he's like, yeah.
What's his first name?
Doug.
Old Iron Guts Doug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He makes that claim. But apparently that's a common bones to break throwing punches. And
those metacarpals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
So I not only was my hand all messed up.
So the ones underneath your pinky, your ring finger, and your middle finger, those 3 broke.
Yeah. And that's why also anyone out there that knows to punch, you're not supposed to punch on that side of the hand at all.
The bottom of your hand. Yeah. There. Yeah.
So all I was going to say, the only reason I thought of it is that the doctors would all frown at me. Like, my hand was killing me. I wasn't feeling that good from the night before.
So you were at
anyway.
Cornell?
Yeah.
And so you go into their infirmary? Is that what they called it? Yeah.
And I'm like, well, what happened was the next day I said, I'm fine. And I felt so lousy from the night before that my hand was the least of my concerns. You know what I mean?
I think I've heard this.
That part of it. I think I've
heard this dynamic from you before where your hangover supersedes your actual injury. So it takes a while for the injury to surface.
Broken bones and stitches. Yeah. So I was lying there. I was miserable. And I was like, I'm going to stay in tonight. And I stayed in. And then as I was like, we were watching a movie or something, my hand just blew up, like it swole up
Oh,
like
right.
a balloon and turned like purple.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not a doctor, but that's not good. So then I went into the infirmary, so I'm like miserable, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like my hand's swollen up and looks all terrible and it hurts. And they were all just kind of giving me lessons. Every doctor I spoke to was like, well, I hope you learned something about, like I think
They write
it's
down
called
on your
get what you
on your
deserve.
chart, drunken frat boy punches something and breaks his hand.
Yeah, the guy who put the cast on, I just walk in, he goes, who'd you hit? I'm like, can you just put the cast on? Like, I'm not here for a lecture from you about... And also, the guy I hit was the one who drove me there. So I'm like, he's the one I hit over there. Like, so not only did I need medical care, but everyone was disapproving and lecturing me at every step of the way. Even when I got it off, the cast off weeks later, it was like, well, I hope you've learned something about blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I didn't learn anything. Just take the cast off.
Don't punch people in the hip.
So doctors looking at me disapprovingly for that. And I think I imagine that one was legit. They would say disapproving things to me. The liver, I might be imagining it, but I think they were a little scowling, like, boy, this liver looks like it's seen some action.
Your liver has PTSD, yeah.
But I'm going to live. So that propped me right up to, like, I'd say a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10.
Nice.
Because I had been, feeling a little down, but that's good, right? So I'm going to live.
That's good.
Outlook is good for lifespan.
Yeah, you can appreciate life a little bit more when you have
We'll
those
see.
scares.
I got my annual checkup in a couple of weeks, and I'm sure that's going to shoot it right back down. I don't know. Does that happen? Is that just me? You get to or do you not? Are you one of the people that doesn't go to the doctor?
You know what? I was going regularly, and then I haven't gone. I went in. Here's what happened to me, Dan. I went in, and the guy said, wow, everything has been great all the time, but suddenly your cholesterol is through the roof. It's like higher than any number I've ever seen. So what should you do? Well, the last thing we're going to do is retest that. You know what I mean? Right. Just because you get this number that's completely different than the track history. So I got to prescribe you statins. And I was like, I'm not going for that. And I told the guy no. He insisted and literally wrote out a prescription, even though I said there was no way I was going to take them. And I don't know if they're just covering their ass, if that's how they operate, but I've heard somebody else say something similar. And then I did a little research on statins, and it didn't seem like the way I wanted to go. And then I heard, I go to the doctor so infrequently that somebody said, did you fast before the blood test? And I said, no, they didn't say anything about fasting. I probably had a Five Guys cheeseburger immediately before I got tested. So I think the results were completely wacky.
So no one talks about this other than right now on this podcast, but I think this is a common sort of thing to experience at these doctor visits, right? Like, so I also had the same thing up to my 40s. It was nothing. You'd walk in, they go, everything looks great, and you'd walk out.
Right.
And then starting in the 40s, they'd start seeing little things. Like they'd be like, oh, your cholesterol looks a little high. That's a common one. And your blood pressure is low. In fact, once I come in, this was the very first time I'd heard anything. I always walked in, there was no problems, and then I walked out. They take my blood pressure, just the cuff.
Yeah.
So I'm not paying any attention. I'm like, I know you'll say it's the same as high school, and I'll walk out. And the nurse looks at the readings and goes, are you in a lot of pain right now? I'm like, no. What?
Right.
And then you're sort of like, then you're tense. And they're like, well, let's recheck it. And I'm like, well, now I'm tense. Like, why'd you ask that? Like, why are you asking if I'm in pain? So, and then ever since then, I never had to take anything. None of it's been too bad, but they're like, I don't know, blood pressure. I don't know, cholesterol.
It's my opinion that blood pressure, those readings can vary tremendously, even in one sitting. Because I went in once, I was so annoyed. Years ago, I went in, I had a knee injury. This was probably almost 20 years ago. And I went into my primary care physician. I had never been there before. And I walk in, and it's just a circus in there, people running around. A guy with like a heat thing on his neck, some young guy, like literally chasing some young woman who worked there through their, literally grab-assing. that term was happening. And I'm like, what is going on in here? And the woman behind the desk, I walk up, I just walk up, just me. And, I have a knee injury, but I'm not really limping noticeably or anything. I walk up and she says, car accident? Like, what am I, Herman Munster? Remember that old show? Like, they'd be, let's get him in an emergency room immediately. I'm like, car accident? What are you talking about?
You're like, no, that's just what I look like.
Yeah. So I gather what was happening is they got a lot of people referred there who were in little fender benders, and then they had soft tissue injuries, this type of thing. So, it was a little bit of a, boondoggle that way. And I'm like, no, I'm actually here for actual medical attention, not to get my $10K check in the mail from some insurance company,
Yeah, or a prescription for painkillers.
Right. So then they make me wait incredibly long time, and I think I just had like a huge coffee, so I'm super caffeinated, irritated, and annoyed. And I get in there, and then you're waiting for the guy to come by when you're in the waiting room and everything. And then he takes my blood pressure. He goes, wow, your blood pressure's high. And I said, yeah, because I'm pissed off. Yeah. And he goes, that has nothing to do with it. I go, listen, I just had like a triple espresso, and I'm annoyed, and I'm totally pissed off, and I can feel my blood pressure. He goes, that stuff has no effect on blood pressure. Listen, I'm a doctor. You don't know what you're talking about. This is what he tells me. I go, okay. I take a breath. Let's do it again. He takes my blood pressure again, like literally 2 minutes later. Oh, it's perfect.
Yeah.
I go, yeah. I could have told you that.
And
he doesn't say, oh, I guess it does vary. I guess anger could affect it. I guess caffeine could affect it. Nothing.
I don't know what happened.
He's like, oh, you're good now. So it's like whatever that device says, I might medicate you or say you're okay. I'm not going to use any thinking at all because that takes energy. God forbid I use any energy to think.
But I feel like people should know this, right? Like, I mean, a lot do, I guess.
I would think, man.
Because I had, blood pressure where it was basically like you might have to go on medication. It's too high. And then they were like, well, let's try it. Same situation where they, on the same sitting, they said, let's try the other arm. They switched arms and they go, oh, no, it's fine.
It's just that arm has high blood pressure. Yeah. We're going to medicate your left arm. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's sort of like, I've seen that too, where it's like, the blood pressure readings just are all over the place. Cholesterol readings fluctuate all over the place.
It's so dopey.
And then there's now, like with these full blood works, there's a million things. Like I've had they're like, we found something that looked bad for, I forgot what it was, the pancreas or something like in the blood work. And they're like, we want another reading. So I had to go back in and they're like, yeah, you're fine. So there's a million, I don't even know what that reading was. It wasn't some well-known thing.
Sounds very subjective, right?
I had another one where they did that. I don't know if they do this to you. They put the EKG on to measure the heart, impulses or whatever. They did that to me.
Yeah.
And then I guess it's very common there. They're like, we saw, I don't know, something that we don't like so much.
Oh, right. Some kind of irregularity.
Yeah. And so I had to do a stress test, like go get on they had an incline treadmill. Did I ever tell you about that one?
I would just be stressed out that I had to go on a treadmill.
Well, the thing that was tense for me is that they hook you up and they put you on the incline treadmill, and then they're like, we're going to keep speeding it up. And then the problem for me was they said, you can get off the treadmill when you can't take it anymore. Like, we're going to keep speeding it up until you tap out.
Yeah.
And I was like, I actually felt a jolt of fear because I'm like, oh, this is going to hurt.
It's going to suck.
Yeah, because I'm going to keep going. Like, I know I'm going to go till I drop. Like, because I'm going to be like, what's the record?
That doesn't really make sense.
If you have any sort of competitiveness in you, you're like, what's the record? Like, what, what?
Yeah.
What's the average? And
I would go until I fell off. The thing like flung me to the floor.
And I was like, this is going to really hurt. And it started.
But that doesn't seem very scientific because some people quit in the drop of a hat, right?
You'd think.
Yeah.
People that never worked out. Or
they'd be like, oh.
Maybe they make them stay on. Because I think that's actually what it was. Because I went to, I forgot if it was every minute or every 2 minutes or something they would change it. And I got to some insane, it was like 20 minutes and I was like pouring sweat. And it was really steep. And it still wasn't that fast, but I was basically jogging uphill at 20 minutes. And they killed it, actually. I broke they were like, all right, that's enough data.
We got to shut this down. It's going to blow.
Like, that's enough data. And again, I wasn't even that fit when I did it. So I feel like a lot of people could have done it. But I think they're used to other, people that just aren't even at all active. And you know, within a minute, they're saying, get me off this thing. I'm starting to break a sweat. And So that's another one. That ended with them like, yeah, I mean, obviously you're fine. You just ran 20 minutes on this thing and everything looks normal. And so now I got to, I feel like in what is a week and a half, part of a doctor visit is some kind of concern that makes you worried.
All right. Oh, so let me finish my doctor story. Yeah. So I kind of really wrecked my knee badly in jiu-jitsu, and it kind of like cracked and dislocated to the inside and then snapped back in place. It was swollen. I really hurt something badly. And so we straighten out the blood pressure issue, and then he looks at my knee and he says, yeah, I don't think anything's broken. We could x-ray it. I go, well, I know nothing's broken. I can tell. I'm not a doctor. The bones aren't broken, but I probably really damaged the joint and the ligaments. He goes, yeah. I go, we could x-ray it. I go, will that show the damage to the ligaments? He says, no. I go, then why would we do that? Shouldn't we get an MRI? He's like, oof, that costs a lot of money. And he wouldn't let me get an MRI because it must impact his bottom line somehow. And then he says, I could give you such and such medication. And I said, what'll that do? That'll bring the swelling down. I go, okay, will that heal it? He says, no. I go, then why would I want that? He goes, well, some people like it when the swelling goes down.
They just don't want a swollen knee.
I go, I want it to get fixed. He's like, oof. Yeah. I feel like I have these wacky conversations with these people in the medical field, and they're like, swelling is a big one. They like swelling because they can do something about swelling.
There's not many things they can do anything about.
It seems
that was like
way,
when
right?
my ribs got hurt. They were like, if it's broken and punching into a lung, we can take it out of the lung. Right. You know what I mean? And like sew up the lung. But if it's not, we're pretty much going to leave it.
Right.
What do you want us to do, basically? You know what I mean? Like if the bones were out of place, they'd be like, we'll try to get them back in place. But if it's cracked, they don't do anything.
They don't. No.
Yeah. But we took the side trip talking about
my injury
medical.
was in jiu-jitsu, so we did get sidetracked, but we could get back to that. Do you want to get into, somebody wrote here, we got a lot of different people are kind enough to write in
that they have jiu-jitsu oriented questions. Now, I will say ahead of time, you're the black belt. There's people on the list that are better at jiu-jitsu than me. So,
really?
Well, I guess most people are better at jiu-jitsu.
I think you're right up there. I wouldn't. You're being too self-deprecating again. But
I'll try.
I threw it out there on our Facebook group. Right. What topics should we cover? And
what jiu-jitsu topics? Or
and a lot of our
topics.
Yeah, and some of our students were kind enough to throw some suggestions out.
So this is your wheelhouse, but I'll see if I have anything to contribute to it.
Dude, I'm sure you do. All your experience. And if you can throw in an anecdote, you're always good at the anecdotes. Oh, that reminds me. Last week you talked about you were in line in New York City to get ice cream, and some guy was coming down the line browbeating people and sort of intimidating them physically to panhandle. It was like aggressive panhandling.
Right.
And you fended him off by you used a combination of techniques. You said, sorry, no, something like this. And then he said, what do you mean, sorry? And then you used your classic Dan Robin technique. You repeated back to him what he said. And that baffled him and stymied him a little bit. But you think it wasn't a mugging.
No, that's not a mugging.
I think it kind of is. I'll tell you why. Because when somebody expresses anger, there's an implied threat of violence. So he was
using that for his panhandling for sure. He was a big muscular guy, and he was going. If people said no, like me, he'd say, "Why not?" Like angrily,
That's an implication that violence is coming. So to me, that's mugging. I mean, they don't have to crack you over the head with a pipe. If they come up to you with a pipe and say, "I'm going to hit you with this," or they point a weapon at you, they're implying more explicitly that violence is coming.
You're right. It's instead of saying, give me your money, it's asking, sort of asking, but sort of implying that if you don't.
He's communicating a threat of violence, for sure. And it's completely obnoxious. The guy viewed it as a more clever process where it's probably harder to get arrested when you're doing that. But it's obnoxious as hell and not right, of course.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea for a mugger though. For the muggers out there that are listening, right? If you just sort of
Want a tip? Yeah.
mugging tip. If you just said like, ask for the money aggressively, you could say, I asked.
Right. You have plausible deniability there.
Yeah. You could even say that, have your script or whatever. You say, I said, could you give me some money?
Please.
Yeah. And then, and the person would say, yeah, that is what he said.
Right.
And maybe you could get away.
They probably would, because people wouldn't probably have a nuanced explanation of like, well, the guy was threatening me the way he was standing there, and the tone of his voice and his gaze and these other things. Yeah.
So,
I'm putting putting that in the win column for you. You thwarted another mugger. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's
quite a record.
That's a controversial one to count that as a mugging.
I'm giving it to you for sure. Because you could have easily, you were with your kids. That's dangerous. You could have easily tossed them some money. Good for you. Okay. So here's our list.
That's direct jiu-jitsu or MMA related questions.
We're getting right into it. All right. You see this list, Dan?
Yes.
Is anything jumping out at you?
I think we just go right down it.
Go down the list?
Yeah.
Okay. Proper mindset. So J.I. already asked us for the proper mindset and preparation for competitors. I think let's just address the mindset thing. And
you've thought a lot about this.
I've thought a lot about it for years and years. And I think it really varies to the individual what their mindset's going to be. So I was very impressed, as I said, with Ebrahim's performance at Cage Titans. And I try to analyze his mental approach. And I talked about it the last episode. I thought he had this sincere and deep gratitude for having the opportunity to compete. And I think that's really powerful. If you could find that, if you can get there, like just being grateful to be alive and healthy and have that opportunity.
So let me ask you a question. Do you think this is related or something different? Because I remember from a long time ago, Fedor Emelianko, who most people probably know who that is, but he's maybe arguably the best heavyweight MMA fighter of all time. And I remember him saying about him getting into a competition. I was going to say the cage, but it wasn't a cage for them. It was a ring. That, they'd ask about nerves or these kind of thing. And he was sort of almost comically not nervous. He had that
He was so
face.
placid. And when he walked into the ring, it looked like he was on beta blockers.
Yeah, like bored.
Bored or drowsy, he looked,
But I remember from way back when, one thing he said, so this isn't all about the whole Fedor approach, but one thing he said was he was excited to show people new things he'd learned and to be able to show, like, he'd put in a lot of time learning and improving, and this was his opportunity to show people.
Dan, I remember that, and I've repeated that story several times. I totally agree with you. I thought that was really an interesting insight.
And I think it kind of takes away from the annoying thoughts, like who's watching me, who's going to be disappointed, who could I embarrass myself in front of, who, all that kind of stuff. I totally
agree. It takes the focus off making mistakes, and it's inherently an aggressive position because you want to show to the world what you can do, your skills. So you can't do that if you're fighting tight and conservatively. You know what I mean? It's kind of an expansive approach, an aggressive, proactive approach, which I think is great.
And don't you think the more analytical you can get to, so it can help with getting past all that nonsense of like feeling embarrassed or feeling like, so if you have a poor performance and you get knocked out, instead of sort of this broad, oh no, or take it for jiu-jitsu, you get quickly choked out, quickly tapped. Instead of like this, oh, that's so embarrassing, sort of beating yourself up, it's sort of more, what happened? Here's what happened. He did this, he did that, like, and more analysis than sort of emotion.
I think so.
Here's the mistakes I made, and here's why it happened. And
if you think about what he says, he actually never mentions winning or losing. So I think what you're talking about is if an athlete is overly concerned with losing, that's a major distraction. It can really tighten up their performance, and they're not going to perform as well as they could. And you can't achieve that sort of flow state or get in the zone if you're tight and afraid that you're going to lose. Got to be able to go for it. Did you watch Tiger Woods in the Masters?
Yes.
I watched the last 6 or 7 holes, and I think
That's all I. That's all.
yeah,
watched.
on the last hole, he needed 2 putt to win. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And he went for it. Like he was aggressive, and I thought that was pretty cool. Like you would think maybe I'll hit it a little soft, so I just get it a little bit closer. I think he went around the rim with the ball, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is, you're being aggressive. That's pretty good. You should always be that way. I think you get a better performance when you're putting it out there instead of being too tight, That would have been a perfect time to tighten up, you would think, right?
Yeah.
And then that could go disastrous, There was the other guy who was right behind him who had a pretty long putt to birdie, I think, on one of the last holes. And then he would have got within like kind of striking range, and he kind of shanked it a little bit. I don't know if that's the right word. What's the guy's name? Cope. He's got some kind of like Eastern European sounding name, and he's a new young
like
guy coming up.
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not like a golf guy.
I don't watch golf at all, but it was an historic event, and Mark Vignali, my roommate and buddy, was here, and he's knows more about it than me and a fan. So we had it on, watched the last 6, 7 holes. Yeah, it was pretty exciting.
And a related point we said about this same sort of getting out of your own head that we've talked about before is the idea of not getting caught up in sort of, like if you feel the nerves, don't get caught up in like, oh, why am I feeling the nerves? Or let me pretend to be that I don't feel the nerves, sort of getting in your head that way.
Yeah.
We've talked about that before of it's perfectly natural to feel adrenaline spikes and nervousness. We said George St. Pierre threw up before every fight. Tito Ortiz was throwing up 20 years into his career with nerves. And so to me, it's all under this same idea of sort of as being as analytical as you can in mindset, like don't get caught up in how you look and what anyone's thinking about you and what, just think.
Well, I think the word opportunity is such a beautiful word because it implies a chance at benefit. You know what I mean? There's something good that can come from this. And the ego trap is the opposite of that. We've talked about the ego trap here several times. The ego trap is when you feel like you're so overvalued that when I go into this contest, if I win, I won't gain any more esteem from people. And God forbid I lose, I'm going to lose a lot of esteem. So that's the opposite of an opportunity. It's pure risk, Right. So when you have that outlook that Fedor expressed about this is an opportunity to show the world what I can do, then he's looking at total plus side. So it gets you out of that ego trap, You're not thinking about losing anything. It's all a chance to win. It's like a free pull on a slot machine at a casino. Doesn't cost you anything, and you might not win, but you could win big. So that should be exciting and would be something that nobody would shy away from.
Right. I never thought of it quite that way. That's interesting. Like, it's just a chance to win. Look at it that way. Just the positive. Because I think a lot of people come with just the negative, like you said. Like
they do.
I can be embarrassed. Because we've talked about this on a while ago on the podcast too. That very few competitors are worried about injury. Right? It's more social things they worry about, like looking stupid or looking bad or embarrassing themselves or, like.
I think that's a big part of it. Yeah.
And so you're saying the key to mindset is using these sorts of approaches to get past that.
I think so. Yeah. An opportunity and gratitude is probably a really great place to start from. When I was down at the Pan Ams last year, like I said, I typically do have a lot of anxiety, and I might use different mantras in my head. And what worked for me on that day was I said to myself, "Oh, I'm just here for me. I may never get this chance to compete again. Who knows? Get hit by a bus? Who knows what would happen? And I'm just here for me. I'm not here for my students, even for my team. I'm just here to have this experience and be as present as possible in it." And on that day, that worked very well for me. But, I might need something else on another day. I think it's very subjective. But, the way Ebrahim came at it, that was it. Gratitude to be there, the opportunity, like I finally get to come into the cage. It was just a great place for him to operate from. And then he also has the right type of humility. He says, you guys are the coaches. I'm the athlete. I'm the student. I appreciate my coaches again, and I respect them, and I learn from them. But not too humble pie, where you're like, gee, I don't know if I'm as good as that guy. Do I really belong in here? It wasn't self-doubt. It was a different type of humility. And I got to think about it more, how he gets there and how he got there and why that is effective, And then he was just driven. You could tell he was just, I'm going to give everything I have to win this fight. And that's just a really good combination. I suspect he had no self-consciousness at all, even in his victory, the way he celebrated, And then they interviewed him afterwards. Did you see the interview? It's posted on Facebook. It's a really beautiful interview. He came across as such a sincere and charming guy. It was just a great performance. Very happy for him. And yeah, that approach seems to be super effective. I think you can bring that into training because not everybody competes in jiu-jitsu tournaments, but there's a certain level of competition that happens when you step on the mat and you do some sparring, some randori, some live training at the end of a class, right? That is a level of competition. And if you're afraid you're going to lose something in that training, that probably hurts your training, and it's psychologically stressful. Where if you think about, I get an opportunity here for something, maybe to learn something, to get better, whatever it is, I often tell students, know why you're there that day. And I know you think about this a lot. So I show up at class. Why am I there? Am I there just to have fun today? Am I there to get a good workout? Am I there to really learn something? And if I am there to learn, what am I here to learn today? I think the more specific you can be and the clearer you can answer those questions.
I hadn't thought about it that specifically, too.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've heard that exact advice, like to come to class and think, what do I want to do today? Like,
have a very clear why. I think what happens sometimes, Dan, is people come in and they're confused about why they're there. They're like, oh, I'm kind of here to have fun. I'm here to they're all good reasons. Have fun, socialize, get in better physical shape, improve your jiu-jitsu. Those are all valid reasons to come in and compete. Compete could be another one. I'm here to compete today. So there's like 5 reasons that you might want to have your training that day. And people confuse them sometimes. So they might come in and not sure what they want to do. So they start rolling. And then in one of the rounds, they're like, well, I'm really just here to have fun. And all of a sudden they get in a bad position and the person's tapping them. And then they're like, oh, no, I'm here to compete. But now it's too late. They're way behind. And then they get tapped, and then they feel lousy about themselves.
It's funny because I've done all these things that you're saying.
Right.
Like I've had many times individual roles where I sort of said, I'm just here to sort of have fun, or maybe I'll go easy, maybe I'll work on my guard, which is terrible, and so I'll drop back and let someone kind of only sort of do my guard, and then think I just want to work on escape, so then I let them pass, and then everything goes south, and say I get tapped. But then I'm in a bad mood about it.
Yeah.
When I should have been it's sort of like you said, I mixed goals, where I'm I'm just going to go easy. I want to get in this tough position. I want to see. And then when it has a bad outcome, it's like I'm reacting like I was, I'm still mad. I'm still don't like it. So
I suspect most students should come in with the clear purpose to learn something and maybe something specific. So if I'm rolling with you and I think, I want to get better at guillotines, and I'm just trying to guillotine you and learn everything about guillotines at the same time. So then if I do get a guillotine on you and tap you, well, that's great. I learned something. If I try to do a guillotine and it doesn't work and you pass my guard and maybe tap me with a Von Flue choke or something, I'm like, oh, it's all good.
That's happened a lot.
And it's all good information. So I'm learning all the time. So the outcome, the winning and the losing, isn't particularly significant. It's all part of the information.
Or why couldn't I get it? Or why?
Yeah. So then, if you approach your jiu-jitsu training that way, you have a good day every day.
It's an interesting thought because I think, again, I've done this for many years as well, and I think even when I'm trying to focus, I can come in and say, I'm going to learn today, but you're not that specific. You're like, I'll learn today something.
Right.
But then that can sort of seem like weeks going by. And then for me, I'll feel like, am I learning? Am I getting better? I I don't feel like, when you sort of don't have a specific thing and you're like, I just want to get better at jiu-jitsu.
Right.
Months can go by and I'll feel like, you've heard me say where I'm like, I don't feel I'm any better.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was like, I want to get better at guard passing.
Right.
And you just really, really focus on that. And then you can feel like, I think I'm getting better at it.
I agree.
And you can see it when, if you're not specific, I think it's harder to see, at least for me.
Definitely.
Maybe I'm more negative than a lot of people, but I don't feel like I'm getting better. Whereas if I picked one thing, like I've got to learn to get out of someone on side control. I've got to get better at getting out and do that for a couple months. I feel like then you could maybe see it, be like, all right, I got better.
Well, definitely.
At that
If you
thing.
just say in an abstract, general way, I want to get better, that's too broad and abstract. And the only way you can measure that is how well you're doing vis-a-vis your training partners who are learning at different rates, and they're different people. So now you're going to have plus days and minus days. Oh, I got over on this guy today. I must be getting better. Someone got over on me this other day. Oh, I must not be getting better. And it's just not an effective and useful way to look at it. Where if you're doing what you're talking about, I want to learn how to get out of side control better, then even if you got crushed, you'd learn, well, I'm certainly never doing that again. I put my hand in a certain way and I just got crushed. Never doing that again. So you would have a good day virtually every day. And then even if you got crushed in the training, but if you learned something, now you're objectively better than you were. You know what I mean? Because you have this new distinction. You actually learned something. It's just a more clear way and accurate way to measure your improvement. And it's really how the good guys get really good. They really do focus on one thing at a time. They'll be like, well, I'm just going to do Kimuras for the next 6 months. And the next thing you know, they get Kimuras from every position possible. And they're really good. I'm like, how did that guy get so good with that type of focus?
And then they can retain that, right? Because they have 6 months of learning it. So then when they move on to something else, they keep their Kimura knowledge.
Yeah.
Because I think a mistake I make, and a lot of people might make, is if you don't focus on one thing for too long, you kind of, you might get a little, so
you don't get deep enough.
Yeah. You're sort of like, I've got a little better at this escape, but then you don't do it for a while.
Right.
And then it goes away. You sort of, you're not in that position for 2 months. And then, and you forgot, you went backwards,
Definitely. This reminds me of something related in jiu-jitsu, slightly different, Dan. So what I sometimes see is guys who arrive at middle age and they get maybe a brown belt or black belt, and now they feel like they're in an ego trap. They feel like maybe they are overvalued and rewarded, and then they have to roll against these young up-and-coming purple belts or these young, strong, fit, aggressive guys, and they're struggling against them, and they have this unrealistic perspective that they should be able to dominate everybody effortlessly, because I'm a magic black belt now. We used to think black belts were invincible, which is just silly. It's not the case. And they can fall into a trap where they're in an ego trap and they feel like every time I step on the mat, I have nothing to gain and everything to lose. So what would a reasonable person in that position do?
You don't step on the mat.
Stop stepping on the mat. Exactly. And which is just a goddamn shame. So then they stop doing something that they love, and they used to get so much fulfillment from. So one of my black belts, Carlos, when he got his black belt, I said, you know what? You should look at this like now you just entered your PhD program and pick something new that you're going to dive into and learn and master and have your focus on that, which he did, which is leg locks. So it's just been he's brought so much great information into the academy because of it, and he seems to me that he's very successful in his jiu-jitsu, and he seems very fulfilled in what he's doing, and he got, not that he was in that ego trap, but he avoided going into that ego trap of like, I have to defend my black belt every time I step on the mat now, which is just an untenable position for anybody.
Right. He found this new focus of the leg locks. Sort of.
And that's a well you could go really deep in. He could spend a long time in there, and it would be fruitful because he would learn a lot and get better, and it strengthens himself and the academy. So I have a lot of respect for him and impressed with that approach that he actually followed through with that and did it. And I would recommend that to anybody who's feeling overvalued or near the ego trap or who wants to avoid an ego trap. It's just a great approach. Definitely.
All right. Should we? I mean, we're only sort of. We're getting we're answering a question, but like moving all over the place with it.
We are moving all over the place, but that's fine.
Yeah,
definitely.
that's
I think these are important issues.
Yeah.
You know, especially the psychological ones. The ego trap is such a big deal that if somebody gets in it, they're just they're not going to develop, and they're going to feel bad about themselves, and they're going to feel miserable. But it's always there. It's ever present. It's always lurking there, that ego trap.
I don't think people talk too much about it, like just casually on the mats, talk about
They don't.
psychology.
Until I discovered that term and they laid out the dynamics. You feel overvalued, so now you feel like you can only lose esteem, you can't gain any. Once somebody laid that out for me, it becomes obvious. But until you hear it and understand it, you just feel kind of uncomfortable and you're not sure why.
Well, that's what I was going to say. When you gave that example of a new brown belt or black belt feeling like it actually makes logical sense for them to quit, because them getting on the mat, they feel like I only have risk to go on the mat and no reward.
Right.
But I think those same people could quit and they don't know that's what happened. Like, do you know what I mean? I guess
Right.
That's what you're saying. They're not sitting there thinking, oh, there's only risk and no reward. All they're thinking is, I'm not that into it anymore. Like, I don't like going there as much.
I don't like going there. I feel uncomfortable. I feel shitty. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel psychological pain and I'm not sure why. Yeah.
Yeah, just like I'll just stay home. I don't feel like going.
Right. And once you understand it's just a natural sort of psychological process that all people go through in similar circumstance, then it's not even personal. It's not even about you. It's just the way the brain and the nervous system works.
Right, and it probably obvious, but it's not just brown and black belts, right? It's purple, blue.
Absolutely.
It can be athletic white belts that feel they should be doing better.
Yeah. And, I remember when I got my purple belt, for a brief time, I had a bit of a target on my back. I remember there was a couple guys, one guy in particular who was a blue belt, and then, I had more experience than him, so I was a little better than him at the time. He's probably better than me now, who knows. But I used to train with him, and I thought I was a pretty good training partner. Who knows? I might have been a jerk, but I wasn't trying to be a jerk. And then when I got my purple belt, I went and I rolled with him, and man, he came at me like it was a life or death struggle. He wanted to tap me in the worst freaking way. And I was a little taken aback. I was like, oh, wow, I thought we were buddies. And he's trying to knock me off because I'm a purple belt now. And he's trying harder than yesterday when I was a blue belt.
Yeah, that's fun.
What do you think about that?
Well, it's weird for me. I've heard obviously about that, but it's weird for me because that's not my mindset at all. Like, I don't,
right.
I don't think that way.
I don't think he's a bad person either.
No.
I think it was just a little bit of a situational thing.
My first thought is that that there'd be less of that now than back then. Was that 15 years ago or whatever? I think it was more. Roles were more
competitive, more aggressive, maybe
aggressive.
Yeah.
I'm not saying better. I don't think learning. I directly don't think people were learning faster and better. You've said that before.
Yeah.
But I think it was seen as really go hard every roll, and I think that's changed in favor of learning. I think people roll now more to learn than to compete, and so
I think it's a more fruitful way to do it.
But I don't feel people coming at me too hard, and I don't think I'd notice if they did. I don't know.
Right.
What do you think? I mean, you don't feel people are trying to score, like notch a black belt when they roll with you, right?
Maybe a little bit sometimes. I'll tell you what happens to me sometimes. I'll be rolling with a student that's pretty good, and then I'll hear some of the other students at the edge of the mat start coaching the guy I'm rolling with. And man, that'll flip my switch faster than anything. And I'm like, oh, really? Oh, you're all rooting for him and coaching him. And then I just have to take it up a notch. So it usually doesn't help the other student when they're getting coached. But, yeah, I don't know. And my son and I have so many spirited roles. I mean, he's trying to take me out. He's just bloodthirsty. He doesn't care about me at all. He wants to tap me in the worst way, for sure. But it's good. It makes me sharper. It makes me better. But he doesn't – I don't mean to misspeak. Yeah. He's not – it's nothing personal. Right. It's just the way
he's competing a lot too.
He's competing. He's a competitor. Takes jiu-jitsu seriously, and he's very good. And he wants to get better. So yeah, It's all good. Yeah.
Well, that's another. I'm thinking of Rory's another example that sort of this ego trap where you think. I told you before where that I was working on getting my guard passing better, and I was like, I think it's getting not too bad.
It's definitely improved. Yeah.
And then I'll have a day where I'm like, I can't pass Rory's guard. I can't pass Gage. And I'm like, there are blue belts, and I can't pass. There's 2 blue belts in a row. I couldn't pass their guard at all.
Those
but
two,
they're good.
They're very good. Those 2 guys have very difficult guards to pass, for sure. Yeah.
So that's the other ego trap. Sometimes when you're thinking too much about belt rank or what you should be doing.
See, when I think about my son, I don't think about him as a blue belt just because I've rolled with him so often and I know how good he is. I'm just trying to implement something. That's all. Yeah.
And even there, if you're too distracted by like, why can't I pass this blue belt's guard?
Right.
You should be thinking like more the first part, like, why can't I pass this guard? Like, what's
this
happening?
Guard? Shouldn't be character as blue belt.
What is he doing? And is there something I can do to get around it?
Definitely.
The answer is no, usually. Like, I can't do
no,
anything.
The answer is yes. You just haven't discovered what it is
yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I had another funny story about this kind of ego trap thing. Years ago, I thought since I was a black belt, not only should I beat everybody, I should do it effortlessly. Like, I shouldn't even have to breathe hard. So you know what I started doing unconsciously, Dan, is keeping my breath shallow even when I started to work harder, which is like the dumbest thing you could do. I didn't want to show, like, I'm not even breathing hard. And if you do that, you get out of breath fast. Yeah. It's not good. And then I think I was doing it for a while until it finally dawned on me that's what I was doing. I'm like, what the hell am I doing? So then I had to make the conscious notion to just breathe sort of loudly anyways. So it's almost better to breathe loudly right from the very beginning, so then you don't put any importance on how loud you're breathing or not breathing, you know.
And again, part of what we're saying too is the more you're thinking about the other people in terms of like what their impression is of you, that's always a mistake. Like always. If you're, you know what I mean? Like, so if you're going light, like, or you let someone pass their guard and they don't know you let them, who cares? You know what I mean? Like, you know, I think
the best jiu-jitsu you can perform and the best you can learn is when you're completely depersonalized. You're like, you've plugged yourself into the jiu-jitsu matrix and you're just observing jiu-jitsu as you're participating in it. And it's not even, it's like non-dual. It's like you've achieved some sort of enlightenment where it's their jiu-jitsu is no different than yours, and it's all just jiu-jitsu that you're observing.
It's all trying to learn from. And it's like you're rolling against a jiu-jitsu robot, and you're trying to see, like,
maybe
how is this thing defending?
You're even admiring what they're doing and observing what they're doing, and you're not placing more value on what you're doing than what they're doing. And the guy I think can do that is that Marcelo Garcia. He looks like he gets to that position and that point where, you know, he videos and puts up a lot of his rolls with his students, and then I've seen him tap a couple of times, and he'll tap to something, and he doesn't hesitate for a split second, and they start rolling again. You know, so
again, so it's no and he'll roll.
He's one of the all-time greats,
right? And he'll roll against anybody, right?
Anybody.
It's not so he's not like, oh, I don't want to look stupid. This guy's really good, and
he seems to really have a great approach to jiu-jitsu, and he seems to be one of those people that's universally liked. I don't think I've ever heard a bad thing about him, or somebody doesn't like him for some reason.
People talk less about him now. Did he stop competing? Is that what happened?
He stopped competing. Yeah. But I think his academy still thrives, and his students, I think, compete very well at a high level and do really well. And I think his style of jiu-jitsu is a pretty good one for sure. Yeah.
Now, since the original question was about competitors, do you think this all of this is a good mindset, but when in competition, do you think it's the same thing, or because we kind of drifted into?
I think if you could just immerse yourself in the jiu-jitsu, I mean, it's hard to do that though, Dan. So it's kind of like I told you, I was listening to a Headspace app, and one of the modules was on sports preparation and sports mindset. And the guy, Andy Puddicomb, who I guess runs that company, he's the sort of the leader of that company. His basic theme was you don't want to be thinking about nothing. You don't want to be completely in the moment. You don't want to have mantras. You don't want to have self-talk. You just want to be there, which is great, but sometimes you can't do that. So I think if you can get there, problem solved. But a lot of us can't, and that's very hard. So if you can't get there, then I think you do need mantras and self-talk and different tactics and devices to get your best performance.
Right. Yeah, because that's true of any of these things, or like proper mindset. You can say, here's the mindset you want to have, but
if it can't,
getting there is...
What if they say, just be in the moment? And you're like, yeah, but I just can't stop thinking about what if I lose? And you have a stress response. And once you have a certain amount of stress response, you can't say just, well, don't have that anymore and just be calm and in the moment. It doesn't work that way.
It's like the blood pressure test. That's what happened with me. And then they said, if it gets high again, we're going to have to put you on this medication. So it better be low. And you're like, well, now you got me stressed out. Like now my blood pressure is going to be high. They're like, here we go. This is for all. Are you going to be on medication or not? And you're like, well,
for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And so, it's like, but calm down, then it'll be low. And you're like, well, it's not that easy, right? But
yeah. Well, I wanted to talk about in the academy mindset because that applies to everybody. And not everybody competes for different reasons, and they probably shouldn't. But I think some of the same psychological pressures apply in the academy. And if you can make progress there, probably also applies when you compete.
Right.
Well, Dan, I think we should wrap it up there. We covered a lot of good jiu-jitsu stuff. I think
we only got to just Jay's.
We got Jay's first half of his sentence. That's kind of typical, right? I come in with a list of 35 things, and we get through 2 of them. Today we got through half of one.
Then sometimes we can go on a run, though, where we'll just start busting through them.
Right.
Have we ever done that, though? Maybe once.
That's usually not good, right? Because then the points aren't that valid if it doesn't take too long.
I think we'll find that some of the points we got to address later points, like some of the things that
I think so.
Later in the list.
And the people that ask about safety, we can talk about that some other time, how to minimize risk and keep yourself
there's all kinds of stuff.
Free from injury. This list. And
we can have another very special jiu-jitsu and MMA related episode.
People like the jiu-jitsu. Yeah, the last YouTube episode was watched by a lot of people. How to get good at jiu-jitsu fast. The secret to getting good at jiu-jitsu fast. That seemed to get a lot of clicks. So,
what was the secret?
The actual secret was to spend a significant amount of time training with people who aren't as good as you. Definitely, that's definitely key.
And that's funny. That's sort of a recent thought. Like, you know what I mean? That wasn't what people used to say.
Right. The most often used phrase is iron sharpens iron, which, it's only a metaphor and it applies. That's good. But, maybe there's something within there. Well, what builds the iron that you're going to sharpen? And when you go with the opponents or the training partners that aren't as good as you, then you're actually building out your sword. You're adding the iron, and then you can go sharpen it against the other iron. Right. How do you like that for a metaphor? Pretty good, huh?
Pretty good metaphor.
I just on the spot came up with that. Dimitri's impressed. Awesome. Okay, Dan, I think we'll wrap it up here. That was some really good stuff.
All right, maybe we'll get another comment next time.
Yeah, definitely. You were brilliant once again. I'm glad you're undefeated in mugging. And
I still think that last one's a controversial mugging claim, the ice cream shop one. But
if somebody did that to me, I would be pretty ticked off, pretty annoyed. I don't know.
Well, I was annoyed when he
you mentioned that.
He confronted me when he said, "Why not?" What do you mean, why not?
It's so obnoxious.
But we're good.
We're good. All right, folks. So please hit the like button. Dan was so irate last time. We got like 10 likes or 7 likes. You guys don't understand what a lather you're putting in when you don't hit the like button. And please share it. Rate and review it. I looked on iTunes. I think we got 26 ratings on iTunes, which is pretty cool. So please rate it if you can find it. I know it's tricky to do sometimes. And
I've had trouble finding it sometimes.
Weird, right?
Look around a little.
Yeah. And it's all good. We'll talk to you folks next week.